Today's Sunday, Chadalid, Oder. Tomorrow is the birthday of the Rebbetzin, Chaimushka. And we go from the shortest kapitel in the Tillim, which is 2 psukim, to a little longer kapitel, yeah? And then after that, we're going to have the longest kapitel, yeah? So now we're stopping to say Hallelujah Hashem Kol Goyim for the Rebbetzin, and in about a week and a half, 2 weeks, we'll begin to say Hallelujah Hashem Kol Goyim for the Rebbe, right? That's how it works, because the Rebbetzin is a little more than 1 year older than the Rebbe. The Rebbetzin is Chaf Hey, right? So how many Chaf Hey till Yud Aleph is Wiffel? Pesach is Shabbos. Pesach is Shabbos, right? So Yud Aleph is Friday, Yud Gimel, Yud Beis, Yud Aleph, Tuesday. Okay, so they're staggered by a day. The Rebbetzins birthday is tomorrow, and the Rebbe's birthday is 2 weeks, 15 days later. Yud Aleph Nissan is Tuesday. So then we'll say Hallelujah Hashem going for the Rebbe. It's a very tiny kapitel. It's 2 psukim. It's a small little kapitel. But there's a lot of chasidus on that kapitel. I'm not at all prepared, but I'm already getting harassment. How come I didn't put them up yet? People want to have it yesterday. So tomorrow we'll talk about the Rebbetzin. Tomorrow's Chav Hei Oder. It's the birthday of the Rebbetzin. He was born in Tafresh Samach Aleph in 1901. So let's continue learning Tanya. Now, what's happened is I've sort of suspended the Sefer and I've been doing lectures week after week after week. I say in Yonim. Why? Because I decided, and I think it's a correct decision, it's a reasonable decision, that we learn as we read Perek Gimel about the 10 koiches, the 10 midas. In other words, the Alter Rebbe introduces the neshama. The introduction of the neshama is Perek Beis Gimel Daled, chapters 2, 3, 4. But there's a very big difference between each of these 3 perakim. Perek Beis, I guess you could say, talks about the etzem neshama, the neshama as it is by itself, and the unity of neshamas, and so on and so forth. How they all come from Chochmah and so on. Perek Gimel, our Perek, talks about the tziyur of the neshama, what the neshama looks like when the neshama comes on into this world. When the neshama comes into this world, it looks like Esa Koiches, 10 faculties, right? That come from the Esa Sfiras Chal Yenes, Chochmah, Bina, Das, and the Shiva Mides, Chesed, Gevurah, Teferes, Netzach, Yesed, and Malchus. Now, what we started to do was we did Chochmah and Bina. So we did Chochmah and Bina. Then we had 3 classes about Hisbonenus, which are a part of Bina. And last week we did Chesed, Gevurah, Teferes. That was the conversation we had last week. And what I explained to you about Chesed, Gevurah, Teferes was that the question is why there are 3. Why are there 3 emotions? You can have 100 emotions. You can have 10 emotions, you can have 1 emotion, you can have 2 emotions. What's the cheshbon of 3? So I explained to you basically that there are so many different emotions. There are so many different words that denote different feelings. But in general, they're divided up into 3. The 3 are what is leaning towards the right, and what is leaning towards the left, and then the middle. So all emotions that are leaning towards the right are included in Chesed. The right means kindness. The right means permissiveness. The right means pshara. Pshara means compromise. Pshara also means to melt and dissolve. Like if you have dust and it's in a big enough volume of water, it becomes nifshar. It melts. It becomes a part of the water itself. That's the tendency of Chesed towards Achtos. Gevurah is the opposite. Gevurah is very discerning, very exact, and very precise, so it separates everything. When you separate everything, whatever little bit of schmutz there is, becomes isolated. And when it becomes isolated, it's not so much fun to look at. And then the third meat is Teferes. What's Teferes is a mix of Chesed and Gevurah. But I presented to you what Chassidus explains about Teferes is that B'chlal, there can't be a center. Logically, Api Seichel, there can't be a center. Because, and again, I'm using Hebrew words, anything that exists in Metzias cannot be perfect. If it's a form, it can't be perfect. So whatever you're going to express an emotion, it's either going to be more Neite Klape Chesed, or it's going to be Neite Klape Gevura. The idea of a center is impossible. But Medvar Mamurim, if you're dealing with Metzias. What I explained to you, the way Chassidus explained it, is that Teferes is not a Midah. Teferes is the Neshama. And, which is above a Midah. Or to say it in other words, if Chesed means you're feeling a person in one way, and Gevura means you're feeling a person in a deeper way. Teferes means you're feeling what that person feels. Ba'asher hu sham. This is how I explained it to you last week. To feel what that person feels. In other words, the midas ha-teferes, true rachamim, true rachmanis, is achieved when you get past the separation from one person and another person. When hagufim uchalokim, the bodies are separated, and the neshames are one. And midas harachamim doesn't mean how you feel about that person. Midas harachamim means you feel what the other person feels. So Chassidus explains that the truth of midas harachamim is not a midah, it's not an emotion. It's something which is much higher than an emotion. It's a connection of one neshama and another neshama that expresses itself in emotion. In other words, how is it possible that there should be a midah which is exactly the center? How can there be a midah which is exactly the center? And the answer is because the midah is being used by the neshama. Chesed is the emotion of me responding to your situation. Gvura is the emotion of me judging your situation. And Teferes is me feeling what you feel. Ba'asher hu sham. And that's the integrity of Rachamim, the idea of Rachmanis, the way it is be'emes, I'll tell you, the true notion of Rachmanis is not me feeling you based on my own feeling of myself. That would either be Chesed or that would be Gevura. Midas Racham is me feeling you as you are. So what I explained to you, and I don't want to spend the whole time repeating this, is that Chesed is the most superficial midah, Gevura is a deeper midah, and Teferes is the deepest midah, right? Chesed is me seeing you in whatever matzav you're in, and imagining it being myself. So when you see a person who's in need and you help them, you're really helping yourself, because you project. You respond not to that person's situation, but that person's situation based on the fact that you could be in that situation. Gevura is actually judging the other person. You look at the other person's situation, and you feel not only how they look, but why they look the way they look. Why are they in that matzah? So the way Midas HaGevura works is, if a person is in a bad situation because of their own stupidity, you don't give them anything. But a person is in a bad situation, and it's not their fault, then you give them b'takbedes. You don't give him a quarter. You give him a nadava. You give him based on Gevura. But in this case, Gevura doesn't mean to be exact and precise, but more, with incredible strength. So Chesed is you experiencing that person. Gevura is you judging that person. And Teferes is experiencing what that person feels. And that's the basis of Midas HaRachmanos. And I gave you the Mashal HaGashmi from a corner, from a wall. That a corner does not exist. A corner is a conception. There's no such thing as a corner. There's a wall to the north. There's a wall to the west. And a person's brain puts them together at a right angle, so you create a corner. So how much of the wall is corner? None of the wall is corner, because a corner doesn't exist. A wall exists. But the seichel of the person makes two walls into a right angle. So the reality of the corner, the metzias of the corner is not the corner. The metzias of the corner is a wall. The conception of a corner, the bringing together one wall and another wall, is ruchniistic, is higher than the metzias of the corner, and it uses these two walls to speak. In other words, in Hebrew you would say a bilti metzias is using two metzias in order to manifest. The concept of a corner uses the physical reality of one wall and a second wall to speak. The corner is not a wall. The corner is not this wall. The corner is not the other wall. The corner is an idea. But that idea doesn't exist physically. It doesn't exist b'mtiyas. It uses the physicality of wall A and wall B to create a third concept, which is a corner. The same is with Teferes. There's no midah of Teferes. A midah, an emotion, is a mitzias. It's a guf. It's a reality. It exists. It takes up emotional space, and because it exists, it can't be perfect, and it has to have a leaning. Either it's leaning towards Chesed or it's leaning towards Gevura. How can you have a perfect center? The only answer is that the neshama, which is higher than the feelings, creates a perfect center. But the center, which is perfect, doesn't exist in Metzias. So it uses the Metzias of this Midah and this Midah to express itself. And that's how we understand the Kaveh, the middle pole. That's how we understand Tiferes. That it's using the form of Chesed and the form of Gevurah to say something which is not Chesed and not Gevurah, but doesn't have a Midah, doesn't have a reality. It's a Ruchniyazdika thing. This is more or less last week's conversation. And I want to move forward. I want to move on. Okay? And the next thing we want to talk about is Netzach Heid and Yosef. So I want to start a little bit again. A lot of this material was already discussed last week, but we're going to repeat it again. I explained to you that there should really be only 3 midas. Even though there are hundreds of midas, hundreds of different emotions, there should only be 3 midas. Why should there only be 3 midas? Because that's all there is. There's leaning to the right, there's leaning to the left, and there's a center. But there are 2 sets of 3. Chagas is one set of 3, and Nihi is a separate set of 3. What's the difference between Chagas and Nihi? The difference between Chagas and Nihi is as follows. Chagas are the emotions that react to what your brain brings you. Or the way I like to say it, Chagas is the goof of the Seichel. And Nihi is the neshama of Asiyah. You have a brain, right? Your brain is ruchniistic. Your brain is spiritual. And your brain has the capacity to go past itself. The brain has the capacity to go past itself and to seek and to search and to look for and to find things that are beyond the person. That's what the Seichel is about. The brain was designed by the Eibishter to go past itself and to bring to the person things that are not part of what the person is naturally. Basically, information, knowledge, data. The brain goes out of itself, right? Whether it's learning Torah, or it's learning about the Eibishter, by looking at the world. The whole purpose of the brain is to know from what I see, what I cannot see. From what I observe, what I cannot observe, using deduction, right? That's how the brain works. And after the brain goes out and gets information, the brain delivers it to the person, to you, and your heart reacts. Your heart reacts to what the brain brings you. The heart's reaction to what the brain brings you is called Chesed Gevurah Tiferes. The brain brings you information that either makes you love or makes you fear. And of course, love has many different emotions that are in that basic category. And love means a desire to be close. That's the Taich Chesed, the desire to be close. Or Gevurah. And Gevurah means a desire to be distant from. I don't want to get too close to this. This could hurt me. Or alternatively, Gevurah means to be very critical, to be very breaking things up into little pieces and to examine the chesredus of each aspect. And then you meet Tiferes. Tiferes is either the joy, the simcha of having this information, or the rachmanis, the feeling of empathy that comes from this information. And that's what Chesed, Gevurah, and Tiferes are. They react to what the Seichel brings to the person. You use your mind to go after the Eibishter. Yeah, you use your mind to try and understand what the Eibishter is. And there's of course a lot of levels of understanding the Eibishter as we discussed. There's Mamala Kalam, the Sevav Kalam. There's Kulk Meklachshav. You use your mind to learn about the Eibishter, understand the Eibishter, and you bring that knowledge to yourself. When you bring that knowledge to yourself, you react. What is your reaction? Avas Hashem, Yidas Hashem. And then it's either Simcha B'Hashem or it's Rachamim, right? One or the other. Again, we talked about these ideas last week. When you bring the Eibishter to yourself and it evokes a desire to be close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, this is Chesed, this is Ahava. When you bring the Eibishter close to yourself and it evokes a sense of awe or fear, this is Gevurah, this is Yiddah. When you bring the Eibishter close to yourself and it creates in you a simcha of your connection to the Eibishter, or a rachmanis on the fact that the neshama is so far away from the Eibishter, this is Midas HaTiferes. This is basically Chagas, yep? What's Nihi? Nihi are also emotions. But they're not 3 more emotions. They're a different category of emotions. They're a different layer. They're a different level of the nefesh. What do we know about Netzach Heid and Yesod? Netzach Heid and Yesod are not emotions that respond to the information that the brain brings. The idea is that your seichel goes out and gets and brings to you, and you process and you internalize and then you respond to. That's called Chagas. But then all the information that your brain gave to you has to translate into bringing something into the world. Right? Your brain went out, got information, brought it to you, right? Let's say a simple example. Yeah? Your brain went out to look for what's the truth. I'll give you a dogma, yeah? The brain went look what's the truth, yeah? And what is the truth? The truth is Lai ha-medrash ikir ela ha-mais. Right? Simple statement. Lai ha-medrash ikir ela ha-mais means the ultimate truth is that the Eibishter's interest and the Eibishter's purpose, or to say it even more profoundly, the Eibishter's emes, is revealed in this world when we bring him to a level of asiyah, action. You don't, when you bring the Eibishter to a level of ideas and feelings and ruchnistic experiences, it's very, very good. But that's not the matorah and it's not the kavanah. The kavanah is to bring the Eibishter all the way to the level of action. Like I've told you many times over the years, the stories and anecdotes and the illustrations, there's kama v'kama maisis. The nekuda is the integrity. A person learns Torah, but his Torah does not affect his hands. His hands are weak. That's called refidim, and that's where Amalek meets us. In other words, it's a truth that our relationship with the Eibishter has to show itself in Maaseh B'Peil, in behavioral deed. When our relationship with the Eibishter shows itself in Maaseh B'Peil, then it's what the Eibishter wants. Then it's true. Then it's a lakus, then it's bittul, then it's dina b'tachtenim, then it's ultimately Mashiach. But it has to come down to a level of action. No? So you got this great brain, for example, and you use this great brain to learn and to understand, right? You know, I don't know if you know the story. I'm just saying the story because it's a nice story. It's also a little bit relevant. That the Rebbe's mother related that when the Rebbe was an older teenager, there was a epidemic of typhus in where they lived, in Yekaterinburg, in the Dnieper. And the Rebbe, that was the only time that Rebbe said that the Rebbe closed the Gemara and he went out to help people. Until that point, the Rebbe sat b'chadrei chadorim, locked away, sitting and learning Yom V'Layla with Asmada and Neira, unbelievable diligence. And what was going on in the world it was not an interest to him. I mean, there were many times that the Rebbe got involved in worldly things, but B'chlal, the Rebbe was by himself. So again, this is a story that I think I read, but I certainly heard it growing up, that the Rebbe, when this epidemic hit, the Rebbe closed his Gemara and he got busy helping the people, patients. It's very painful, and they were in quarantine, so people were not allowed to visit them, and he would go and physically care for them. And then he got sick himself. The Rebbe himself got sick. Again, these are all rumors, but that's when the Rebbe lost his hair. He got sick himself. And there was a period of time that the Rebbe was kvayochel in a state of delirium. In other words, he was speaking words that were not necessarily understandable to us. So the Rebbe's mother said that if he would lean over and listen to what the Rebbe was muttering, what he was muttering was that Elam Atzilus is amazing, Elakus is unbelievable, and Ein Sefer is unbelievable, and the Eibishter is interested in Asiyah. That was a bocher, you understand? The Rebbe was a Rebbe always. He didn't become a Rebbe when he came to America and he discovered Cheshech Kafel M'chupel. The Rebbe went kvayochel when he was speaking what seemed like incoherent words. So the Rebbe's mother related that if you would listen to what he was saying, he was speaking about Hafla the Ilmus Al Yenim and Hiniach HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Eibishter put it all aside. Why? Because to bring the Eibishter to the lowest world is the expression of the emes of the Eibishter. Right? Everybody understands it. If the Eibishter is a balabayas over his world, but he can only go to 98% of it, and there's 2% where the Eibishter cannot go, so in 2% of his world, the Eibishter is not a balabas, which is Hepech Achtus. On the other hand, if you say that there's a way to bring the Eibishter even to the most ungodly of places, that is Achtus, right? That is Achtus. Achtus Hashem is not that the Eibishter is one. Achtus Hashem is that there's nothing besides for the Eibishter. And this is why the expression of this, the symptom of this, the reality of this is called Lai HaMedrash Ikir Ela HaMaisa. HaMaisa Hu HaIkir. Right? The Rebbe said 100 times, 1,000 times, 10,000 times. HaMaisa Hu HaIkir. The action is the main thing. The action is the main thing because it gives credibility to Ruchnius. To be a Yid in a closet doesn't make Yiddishkeit emes. To bring the Eibishter to a place where otherwise there would be no Eibishter, Rahman al-Islam, and you see that the Eibishter can be a Sheilat and a Meishal even over there, that's called Dina Leis Barach B'Tachtenim. See, for this you got to act. This you got to do. So the brain can understand all the philosophy, the heart can feel all the value and the meaning and the richness of what that philosophy is, But now you have to translate it into a Ma'aseh B'Peil. It has to come down into behavioral action, into Peil Mamish. And if it doesn't come into Peil Mamish, it questions the credibility of all the spirituality. And when you go from Ruchnius to Gashmius, it's very complicated. It's very complicated. To be involved in the Eibishter, in Ruchnius, in theoretical ways, is easy. It's the Eibishter's world. When you have to take that and bring it into El Mazeh, Gashmi B'Chumri, this is incredibly challenging. There's all kinds of challenges. Of course, there's the challenges of Elam Hazeh itself. This world is not an easy world. It's a tough world. It's a competitive world. It's a jealous world. It's a world of lack, and so on and so forth. Yeah, but in addition, there's the challenge of bringing the Eibush into this world, and it should be the Eibush. The whole point is that you shouldn't compromise it. You bring the Eibush into this world, and it's the same Eibush that you had in your Beis HaMedrash. It's the same Eibush that you had in your Yeshiva. It's the same Eibush that you had by Chadrei Chadorim, that now you're bringing into El Mazeh Gashmi B'Chumri, into the real world, into Ma'aseh B'Peil, into actual deed. So it's tough. It's tough. And in order to get this done, you need power. And this power is not about understanding ideas or feeling ideas. It's about making it happen. And there's a separate set of emotions that are the energy, they're the power behind the deed. If a person wanted to do something in Ilam Achitz, if you wanted to start a business, which is not Kedusha at all, you want to develop a skill, you want to become a professional, you want to do anything in the real world, you have to work very, very hard. And in order to succeed, you have to be very, very determined, and you have to be able to put up with failure and disappointment and people not agreeing with your endeavor and fighting against you, and you have to overcome all those obstacles and so on and so forth. Yeah. So even in Chitenius Elamis, you want to do anything in the real world, you have to be very determined, and you have to be prepared to take risks, and you have to work very, very hard, and you have to fight all kinds of obstacles, and those energies are called Netzach Heid Yesed. But we're talking about the Neshama, and the Neshama has Netzach Heid Yesed of Kedusha. Netzach Heid Yesed of Kedusha means how you use the midas of Nehi to overcome the challenges about bringing the Eibishter to the real world, and to in fact bring the Eibishter to the real world. And this is what the Rebbe is. I mean, this is really what the Rebbe is. Yeah, the Rebbe is al kus Getlichkeit on the highest possible levels. And what was the Rebbe's whole passion? The Rebbe's entire passion was Maaseh. That you could be a Yid, you could bring the Eibush, you could bring Yiddishkeit to the most remote place. I spent Shabbos. You knew I was going to tell you that sooner or later, right? Yeah. I spent Shabbos in a city called Acton and Concord, Massachusetts. It's too close to fly there, so I sat in the car for 4 hours on Friday and 4 hours last night. A big schlep. You come to a small shtetl, mamish a klein shtetl. I don't know how many Jews there are. There are not a lot of Jews. There's not tens of thousands. It's not Boston. It's 45 minutes outside of Boston. And there's a Beis Chabad, a younger man who went on Shlichus 18 years ago. He was already then, he's older than I am, he was already then with a mishpacha, and he moved to this place, and he built a small Chabad house, and he has people. I'm sitting at his table, and I'm just thinking to myself, imagine he hadn't come here. Just imagine he hadn't come to this place. You have kids in that room, kids, young people, kids, who are... He doesn't have many Shemitah Shabbos, unfortunately, and you can't call a person from who doesn't keep Shabbos. But they're likely to keep Shabbos at a certain point. They're probably not going to live in a place where the closest shul is 5-6 miles away. But they're doing so much Yiddishkeit, and they have a real sense of being Yidden. And I'm sure that over the course of a year he meets, you know how Shluchim are, right? The whole idea of a Shliach is that you give every Yid what that Yid is able to take right now. So some change their lives completely, some change their lives a little bit, some show up Yom Kippur, show up Simchas Torah. But every one of these Yidden would be lost completely if not for the fact that a Lubavitcher Yid, whose whole life is Torah and Chassidus, who would have been much more comfortable living in a hub of Chassidus and Yiddishkeit than being involved in Ruchnis, Avodas Hashem, and he moved to this place. I walk at this kitchen, 5:30. Shabbos comes in early over there, so it's 5 o'clock. Lichtmenschen was 5:30, and he's washing the floor. I'm telling you, I'll say in English what I just said in Yiddish. I'm going to tell you a story. I don't know if it's true, but I heard it. I heard it years ago, many years ago, that Reb Zalman Gerari Alav Shalom I don't know whether he asked or the Rebbe offered, but the conversation was, what is a chassid? So the Rebbe told us, Alma Geradi, you should go and see the Meishke Gurkov. Meishke Gurkov is a shliach of the Rebbe also in Boston. So he went to Boston to see what's Meishke Gurkov doing. He walks into the Beis Chabad in the middle of the afternoon, and Meishke Gurkov is washing the floor. Meishke Gurkov knows Likutei Torah by heart. Meishke Gurkov knows Likutei Torah, cover to cover by heart. He's washing a floor in the day school. It's not normal. It's completely not normal, huh? And so I walked into his kitchen and he was washing his floor, so I told him the story. Again, I don't know if the story is true, but it's very possible that it's a true story. I didn't hear it today. I heard it when it was a bocher. So it was a lot closer to when it could have happened. It's very possible that it's a true story. Anyway, but the point is, this is the credibility of the Eibishter of Torah. And the Eibishter is not what happens in a Makam Kodesh. It's that you can bring Kedusha to every place in the world. But in order to do this, you have to fight against Elam Hazeh. And for this, you need midas. But these midas are not Ava V'Yir and Tiferes and Nachmim. They're not emotions about love and fear and joy. They're emotions about toughness and about aggression and about fighting against enemies and dealing with the real world. And of course, the hardest part of this is you have to bring the Eibishter to this world, and he has to reach this world, and it should still be the Eibishter. It should still be the Ratz and the Elyon. It should be unupshotted. It should be with no compromise. This is the Nisoyan. This is the heart. So just like there are three midas that are, I call them the Guf of Seich, right? The external manifestation of the information, of the data that the brain collects from its environment and from the Torah Lahavdil and everything else. And there's a right and a left and a center. When one encounters Al-Mazah, there's also three emotions. One is to the right, that's called Netzach. The other is to the left, and that's called Hoyd. And the third is the center, which is called Yossi. Now, Netzach, Hoyd, and Yossi are very, very difficult to figure out in Chassidus. First of all, they're not discussed nearly as much. There's so much discussion on Ava V'Yira. I mean, in Tanya alone, there's so much on Ava V'Yira, yeah? And even Tiferes, Nachman. But it's hard to find my modern to discuss Netzach. So there are quite involved discourse, that's what you say, but after all, it's not the same. And the problem is that there are contradictions. I have seen my morim that say that Netzach is in Kavah Gvura and Hoyd is in Kavah Chesed. Eat your heart out. In other words, I'm going to share an idea with you. But I want to make it very clear that this is not the whole story, because I don't know the whole story. The story is very complicated. But we're going to accept, for the purposes of this Shmuas, that Netzach is Kavah Gvura and Netzach is Kavah Chesed, is the right side, and Hoyd is Kavah Gavura, and Yosei is Kavah inside, which is, I think, how it is in most places. That's how it is in Tanya. The Alter Rebbe has a Gersa Kedesh Tesvav. Alter Rebbe has a letter printed in the Tanya, which unfortunately is missing words. Right by Netzach and Yosei, exactly where you need him, where he explains the Midas. And I said to you last week that perhaps that Gersa Kedesh Tesvav is a supplement to our Pei Gimel, because Pei Gimel is supposed to talk about the Esa Koiches, the 10 Koiches of the Neshama. But it only discusses Chabad, Chos, Mebin, and Das, Chesed, Gevurah, Teferes, Nezach, Chayzeh, Malchus, are really not discussed in our Pedic. So this is why I'm interrupting the Limud Tanya to give you this Shir, Balpeh, because I'm sharing information that L'choida has the Shaykhs to hear, but it's not in the Tanya. So basically the difference is as follows. Netzach means aggression. Aggression. I like to translate Netzach as determination. But Netzach means the midah that is behind taking on an enemy, a fight. There's an opposition, there's a difficulty, and you're going to fight with it. You're going to smash into it. It's an aggression. It's an offensive midah of fighting with an enemy. Now you understand very well that when you have a midas hanetzach, when you're fighting with an enemy, it's not exactly fine-tuned, right? When the higher emotions are very edel, they're very sensitive. The higher emotions are very edel because they're in a theoretical realm. As long as you're living in spiritual, as long as living in your head and in your heart, everything is perfect and beautiful. The minute it hits the real world, it becomes a mess. Midas hanetzach is a fight. And when you fight, it's not perfect. But the power of that fight is what is necessary to bring the Eibishter into this world. It would be nice if it would be perfect. And of course, if we were more perfect, then our midas would be more perfect, and our influence on the world would be more perfect. But we got to be what we are, right? Midas HaNetzach is an aggressive midah that comes to a place and fights, because he has to bring the Eibusher to that place, and he does it in the most efficient and the most correct way possible. But it's a midah, it's an emotion, and emotions are not fine-tuned, certainly not midas HaNetzach. And it fights with its environment. You come to a place, the place it doesn't agree with what you want to do and how you want to do it, and you say, no, it has to be my way. I sat in the car last night for 4 hours, right? So we fabrang for 4 hours. So we were discussing a book that was written by David Eliezer, Harav David Eliezer, Shliach HaRebbe in California. It's called The Secret of Chabad. It's not a book on the Rebbe. It's a book on Shluchim, on Shlichus, and on Shluchim, written by an insider. It's not the first book, but if you can stomach politics, it's a very good book. I'm giving you a fair warning, because he tells the story of everybody who tried to stop Lubavitch from day one. He doesn't use too many names, but he talks about organizations that we all know and recognize, and he shows how in every step, any time a Lubavitcher came to a place and he tried to do good things, the people who should have helped him fought against him. And he tells stories, and he tells how today, after all of these years and all of these decades, the situation is so in reverse that when they do events in California, in Southern California, for example, those organizations bet in sich b'Chabad that they should be able to be a tag-along. Anyway, it'll make you feel very good about being a Lubavitcher, I assure you. It's really very, very uplifting. But he tells stories about different shluchim. Yeah, I'm going to give you just one example. Shlomo Kunyel I came to California in 1965, which is over 50 years ago. And he was such a makusher. I mean, Shlomo Kunyel is such a chassid. He sees the Rebbe wherever he looks. He only sees the Rebbe. Maybe he doesn't see you. Yeah, he sees only the Rebbe. And his first project, his first initiative was release time, Mitvach Shah. Because that's what Lubavitch did. Lubavitch took public school kids out of public school and gave them religious instruction. So he came to California and immediately began to do this. To find Jewish, I mean, in the city like Los Angeles, how many Jewish kids did you have in the public schools? Probably thousands, maybe tens of thousands. And you're talking 1965, there was so little Yiddishkeit in California in 1965, it's marvel. Really. There was so little Yiddishkeit in California in 1965. And he began to look for Jews. And he was visited, or he was contacted by the Federation, by the people who thought that they were the leaders of the Jewish people in California, and they said to him, we don't do release time. Jews don't do release time. Why not? Because if we're going to take our kids out of public school and give them religious instructions, the Jewish kids may be noticed, and they can create anti-Semitism, and our whole endeavor is to play down Jewish identity to avoid anti-Semitism. So he says to them, but the Christians do it. He says, yeah, the Christians do it, but mir fühlen sich nicht so. It's not our minig. So Shlomo Kunyan says, it's not your minig, but it's my minig. And they told him very straight, you should know, we are the leaders of the Jewish people in California, and if you want to be here, you want to have any success, you want to get anything done, you're going to have to do it according to our rules. And if you're not going to follow our rules, you're not going to be able to last here a minute, because we're not going to let you. So that was the beginning of the story. And there was a war for years. And they did really, really nasty things. It's a long story. I don't want to tell you the story. I don't want to tell you the whole story. But bottom line is, they did such nasty things that they ended up with so much egg on their face that they had to back off completely, and he was able to do whatever he wanted. But you had to have will of steel. An ordinary person could not go to California and do what Rabbi Yuna did, and push it through, and push it through, and push it. And in the beginning, he was by himself. In other words, now, as a Melucha, hundreds of shluchim. It's like unbelievable what California is. When he went, he was by himself. And it was him and his wife. And there were enemies wherever he turned and looked. And he had to push it through, and push it through, and push it through, and push it through, and push it through. And he pushed it through. You have to be made of steel. I mean, Kunyan is not a road. Anybody who knows him, we've met him once, you understand that you want to be behind him, not in front of him. He's a chassid, and his whole mitzvah is to get something that ever needs done. And you need sometimes a battering ram. In other words, it's not so pretty. Midas HaNetzach is war. And Midas HaNetzach has an incredible amount of power, and it's aggressive. It fights, it pushes, it pushes, it pushes, it pushes, until it pushes through. Midas HaNetzach, from the personality of a person, you have built into your... I would imagine you could develop everything. Every person's... That's an interesting question. Every person's neshama is built complete. We all have a full set of tools. And then we also have a personality. And remember, we have a nefesh elokis and a nefesh bahamis, and we have Yetzer Teva and Yetzer Hara, which all complicate these things. Yeah? But everybody has every midah. And then we have a personality. The personality that we have affects what we naturally are likely to be. In other words, some people are chesed kind of people, some people are gevura kind of people, by nature. Everybody has all the midas. But in some people you see one midah stronger and another midah weaker, and vice versa. So your point is well taken. In other words, if a person's teva is that he's more of a sheep, I once heard from Tzvi Greenwald, it says in Pirkei Avos, As ponim legehenim uboishes ponim leganedim. And then it says, Yiratzav vanach Hashem Elokeinu legabeseinu sheyibana beis hamikdash me'el v'yameinu Hashem tzachas. Right at the end of Pirkei Avos. As ponim, if you're a chutzpahnik, go to Gehenim. Beishes ponim, if you're sheepish, if you're bashful, go to Ganedim. So he asked a bunch of questions. And the first one is, why you put the as ponim before the beishes ponim? Shouldn't you say first the good and then the bad? He types Poshet. As ponim, if you're a chutzpahnik Yid, you can go into Gehenim and remain a Yid. Beishes ponim, you're a sheep, you're a nebuch, you're a weakling, stay in Ganei. Because Gehenim will eat you up alive. You understand? You're right. Everybody has all midas, but not everybody has it to the same extent. And can you develop it? I would imagine to some extent you can develop it. I would also imagine that to some extent Teva Sheni never becomes Teva Rishon, right? Second nature is not as strong as the first nature. So you probably can develop it. But it's true that some people, every person is created with a different set of tools and with a different place and a different purpose. And this is a midah, right? The Basei Lagani. One of the biggest discussions of Basei Lagani is about midas hanetzach. The power of victory. I have to win at all costs, and nothing can stand in your way. So I don't know if I answered you, but at least I acknowledged the question, yeah. Midas hahoid is akshonos. Hoid doesn't fight with anybody. Hoid doesn't fight with anybody. He just doesn't move. Hoid is stubbornness, right? In Hebrew, hoid means submission. Moid, I accept, I acknowledge, I believe in this truth. Midas hoid is not an aggressive midah. Midah doesn't fight with anybody. Hoid just sits in his place and will not budge for anybody or anything. The whole world attacks from 1,000 different angles, with a whole bunch of different reasons why it should move from here to here, or change from this to that. And hoid says, this is where I am, I'm not budging. And so hoid is not aggressive. Hoid is not going out into the world. But hoid is strong in its place. So you see the logic for why midas hanetzach is kava yamin, is the right side. And midas hahoid is kava smoil, is the left side, is quite obvious. Because chesed means gilui. Always a chassidus. Chesed means gilui, to go out. So midas hanetzach is in kava yamin because midas hanetzach is an aggressive emotion. It's an emotion that goes to where the enemy is and takes him on. Midas hahoid is in kava gevura because kava gevura is tzimtzum. Kava gevura is I stay in my place. But just like in chesed and gevura, gevura is deeper than chesed. If you remember the conversation that we had, chesed is the first emotion. The first emotion reacts to the situation. How do I feel about the situation? Midas HaGevura is a deeper emotion. Not how I feel about the situation. What is the truth of this situation that I should feel? It judges, right? So Netzach and Heid are also similar. Netzach is a very aggressive emotion. But it's an aggressive emotion that's the first reaction. You have an obstacle, you fight with the obstacle. And behind Netzach there has to be Hoid. In other words, Hoid is not aggressive, but Hoid is deeper. Hoid is not... How do I say this? I exist because I have somebody to fight with. I exist because this is my principle. So there's a depth in Midas HaHoid which is different than and deeper than Midas HaNetzach, because Midas HaNetzach exists in the context of the enemy. Midas Hahoid is a Gevura Midah. Gevura Midah, this is the emes. And because this is the emes, I'm going to stand on my emes, and no one's about to move you from my emes. So that's basically the difference. And of course, sometimes you need netzach, and sometimes you need hoid. There are situations where the required midah is to be aggressive and to go out and to fight and to take on obstacles and do what needs to be done. And sometimes the midah you need is akshanas, stubbornness. It's a different midah. Akshanas, ayid ritzach nish from platz. Right? Al yevesh v'pnei amaligim. I don't care what you think about me. Is midas ahoid. Right? I'm going to not let you stand in my way. Is midas hanetzach. And both of them are emotions that are not about, they're not fine emotions. They're not emotions that are about experiencing the emes of something. They're emotions about taking the emes and pushing it into Elam HaSheker. So it's not refined, it's not as sensitive, but it's fulfilling the purpose. And the purpose is that you have to bring the Eibishter to the world. And to bring the Eibishter to the world, you mean Midas HaNitzachin, and you mean Midas Haidah. And then the third Midah is Yossi. Now I'm going to explain it to you, but I don't understand it. Now that's interesting, right? I'll tell you the concept, but I can't explain to you the experience. I mean, I can't really explain Tefedes either. I talked about Tefedes, last week. I repeated it again this week. Now I'm going to talk about Midas HaYesod, and I'm repeating, making it very clear that I don't fully understand. I don't understand the regesh of it. Midas HaYesod means like this. What's Midas HaNetzach? Let's go back to the beginning. Midas HaNetzach. I have to get something done. And I got to push it through. And there's a world out there that's doing its own thing, and I want to change the world. That's very simple. I want to change with the way the world is. So if you come into the world, and instead of saying, okay, I'm going to be like the world, you say, I am going to make a change in the world, you're going to have to fight with the world. The world is not going to invite you and say, please, come sit next to me and make me uncomfortable. Come sit next to me and tell me what's wrong with me. Come sit next to me and try to change me. So Midas Netzach is very aggressive. It fights with the world. Right? In other words, the koyach of Midas HaNetzach comes from the enemy. Midas HaHoid finds itself in an environment where there's an enemy, and it says, I'm not going to move. But both Midas, Netzach, and Hoid come from the person. In other words, you bring from within yourself an aggression. You bring from within yourself an akshanas, a stubbornness. Yeah. Midas HaYesod is called hiskashrus. Yesod means you have to bring something, you have to do something in the world. And the world stands in your way. And there's an emotion. Not an emotion that experiences the reasons for this and the philosophy of it and the theory of it. But an emotion that has to do with making it happen in the real world. And the strength for the emotion of Midas HaYesod comes from what it is that you need to do itself. In other words, you don't see an enemy. You don't fight with an enemy. You don't experience opposition and hunker down. You connect to what it is that you want to do, and you draw strength, what you need to do, in order to do it. In other words, you have to achieve something in the world. You have to make a dira le'yizbarach b'tachtenim, in whatever place, and in whatever way, in whatever conditions. So instead of seeing an enemy that you're fighting with, or instead of seeing an enemy that you're defending yourself against, you see only what you need to do. And you draw emotional energy from what you need to do in order to accomplish it. Now, the point is, and again, I'm going to explain to you Midas HaYesod, even though I can't understand Midas HaYesod. The point is, just like Tefedes, right? There's no such emotion as Tefedes. We all understand that, because emotions are things. They're not infinite. They're material. They're mitzias. They're not physical. They're spiritual. Bodies, forms, which makes them limited and imperfect. A center cannot exist in an imperfect system. It's impossible. So what's the deadhead? The deadhead is that Midas HaTefedes uses the emotion of chesed and uses the emotion of gevura to say something which is not chesed and not gevura, but is above chesed and gevura. And the same is true here. If you want to do something in the world, and the world stands in your way, so there's basically two emotions. And of course the word basically is very important, because there's probably hundreds of words that you could use to denote Netzach and Hoid. But Netzach is an aggressive emotion, that's why it's Kavach Chesed. Hoid is a defensive emotion, it's an akshonis emotion, that's why it's Kavach Gevura. What's Yesod? Yesod means you're not reacting to the world. You're connecting to what you need to do. The fact that the world stands between you and what you need to accomplish does not define your emotion. And the strength of the emotion for Midas HaYesod is a little bit of Netzach and a little bit of Hoid. In other words, just like Teferes is a little bit of Chesed and a little bit of Gevurah, and it says something deeper. Midas HaYesod is a little bit of Netzach and a little bit of Hoid, but it's saying something deeper. And let me see if I can explain this. Let me see if I can explain this, okay? How did I explain Teferes to you? How did I explain Teferes to you? I explained Teferes to you as feeling what another person feels. Right? Midas HaChesed is how you feel about that person. Midas HaGevurah is how you feel about that person on a level that's a little bit deeper. Midas HaTeferes means you feel that person. Yeah. So accordingly, what would be the Midas HaYesod equivalent? Midas HaYesod means you feel what you need to do in the world. Something has to happen in the world. You're connected to the worldly level of what you need to do. And you feel that it needs to be in the world. And the strength to get yourself from an idea to a reality comes from a mix of Netzach and a mix of Hoid, but you're not fighting with anybody. Right? You can't fight with somebody. In order to fight, you have to have an enemy. To have an enemy is a certain kind of a relationship. It's not a perfect relationship. Yeah? What's Midas HaYesod? People are fighting with me and I'm in action. I'm not going to budge. I'm going to stand in their way. Yeah. Midas HaYesod, I'm not feeling the opposition. I'm not feeling the opposition in a way that I'm going to fight with the opposition. I'm not feeling the opposition in a way that I'm going to stand up to the opposition. I'm feeling what I need to do. And I use the energies of Midas HaNetzach and Midas HaYesod to get from here to there. But what am I feeling? What's my regesh? In other words, what's my focus? My regesh is not that I have to overcome an enemy. My regesh is not that I have to resist an enemy. My regesh is that I have to make this happen. Now, again, I don't know if I explained it. I don't know if you understand it. I don't know if you agree with my explanation. But this is basically the idea. I've said the word basically because it's hard to find in Chassidus an explanation of these midas the way you have in Chassidus an explanation of Chesed, Gevurah. There are Maimorim that explain Netzach and Hoid. Yesod very little. But you have Maimorim that explain Netzach and Hoid. Okay? Yesod is the deepest midah. Yesod is the deepest midah. Why? Because it's connecting what's outside of this world to this world in a way that's not brutish. It's not coarse. You're so focused on what needs to get done, you don't see an enemy. There's enemies there, and you use emotions that are used typically to fight with an enemy to get those enemies out of your way. Yeah. You use emotions that require a lot of akshanas to deal with people who are trying to hurt you, but you're not feeling an enemy. You're not feeling an enemy in an aggressive way. You're not feeling an enemy in a defensive way. You're feeling what you need to do. And the emotions to get you from here to here automatically fight off the enemy, but you don't see an enemy. Think about that in personality, in tchunas hanefesh. If you're trying to do something and people are standing in your way, and you fight and you fight and you fight and you fight, and you never feel like you have an enemy, you simply feel like it has to happen, and whatever is necessary to get from here to here, I will do. And the fact that there's enemies standing in my way, it's not my concern. It's not my focus. It's an incredible amount of emes, incredible amount of bittul. Right? For a person to go on shlichus, yeah, and to meet obstacles, and not to say, oh, I hate him. When I mentioned, the Rebbe didn't send the Rebbes on shlichus. He sent shluchei shaladim k'moisei mamish on shlichus. But shluchei shaladim k'moisei mamish is not the adam. You know what I'm saying? Rabbi Groner from Australia went on shlichus. Before he went on shlichus, so he was not the first shlich in Australia. The first shlich in Australia was Rav Zalman Sarabransky, who was a yid of Mesiras Nefesh, the first generation. And everything, he started everything. And Reb Zalman asked the Rebbe to send him Rabbi Groner. So the Rebbe told Rabbi Groner the following. Rabbi Sarabransky is the boss in all areas. In Gashmis and Ruchnis, every decision, he's the balabas, you work for him. And what's going to be your title? The Rebbe says, no. So you have to find yourself a title. V'tzich zuchen not the tool. And then the Rebbe says, Az ich zog dir, shluchei shalodom kemeisei mamish is genug. You don't have a title. He's the boss. But I'm telling you, shluchei shalodom kemeisei. You're the shluchei, the Adam is Rebbe. Yeah. Shluchei, is that enough? Is that a satisfactory title? Does that work for you? Is that enough honor? Shluchei shalodom kemeisei. But the reality is, when the shliach comes to that place, I mean, we understand a little bit how much the Rebbe how the Rebbe experienced with every shliach his halamas vestadim. I mean, the Rebbe lived with every. When you were going through a hardship on shlichus, the Rebbe was there. He experienced it with you, b'pashtas, and he agonized with you. And I don't understand how Rebbes work and why Rebbes work the way they do, but the Rebbe helped as much as he possibly could, and the Rebbe understood that this has to be this difficult because you want to change the world. If the world doesn't want to change, and you fight and you fight and you fight, and you push and you push and you push and you push. No, who could blame a shliach for hating somebody? He's standing in my way. It's not me. I would never come here on my own. If you leave it to me, I'd live in Brooklyn, open a grocery store, or whatever I would do. This is entirely the Rebbe, the Mishaleach. So who's he fighting with? No, so you blame a person for saying he's my enemy? That's me, that's on it. Yeah, but for a person to have such emes, that he's dealing with all kinds of obstacles, and he only sees the matara, he only sees the end. So the emotions to get it from here to there are emotions of netzach and emotions of height, because there is no emotion for me to say Yossi. Just like there's no emotion for me to say rachamim and me to say simcha. There's no emotion for the center, because the center is not an emotion. Emotions cannot be perfect. They can't. That's the nature of emotion. A body cannot be perfect. The mitzias cannot be perfect. All the emotions are on the outside, especially netzach and Yossi. And because these emotions are on the outside, they don't have the fineness and the exactness that the mind has and that the chagas has even. Yeah? But if you're so busy with what you have to get done, and whatever things stand in your way are not entities that you're going to engage with. Of course you're fighting with them, but you're not fighting. You're doing what you need to do. In other words, your emotional regesh, what you feel, is the mission. And the fact that getting from here to there means I have to push through things, but you don't give enough metzias to those things, you don't call them an enemy. It's just part of what you have to do. That's a little bit of an illustration of Midas HaYesod. I'm trying my best to bring it to you, okay? So to complete, what did we do today? What did we do today? Last week, officially, I hate the word officially, but we did Chagas. We Chesed Gevurah Tiferes. This week we did Netzach Heid and Yesod. There's a lot of things that we still need to do. First of all, I want to have a discussion with you about the difference between the emotions of Chagas and the emotions of Nehi. And also want to talk a little bit about Midas HaMalchus, a little bit. And then I'm going to talk about the Chamisha Chushim. So it's going to take us a couple more classes, but we'll actually go from point A to point B. We don't do things, we learn things, yeah? But hopefully we can learn it in a way that at least you can understand it a little bit. Okay, questions or comments? Yes, ma'am.
I'm thinking back to like a visual of the whole idea of the kaf and the center being connected to emes all the time.
Right.
It seems like you can feel that. You can't really describe it. You can yeah, this is like...
And how does it feel?
Feels
honestly.
Right. It feels right.
It feels right. It probably also feels simple.
Yeah. It's not like you... that's it.
It feels...
You get it. It's like you get it.
And it feels humble.
That's right.
So the issue is, how do you let that part of yourself to come forward?
Right, that's when you need the other emotions which are more external. They're not... Otherwise you just sit there.
Right, okay, I agree.